The dust-laden wind carried the scent of desperation across Willow Creek as Katherine Turner stumbled through the bustling Saturday market, her once fine dress hanging loosely from her frame, telling the silent story of meals missed and hope abandoned. 3 months a widow, with nothing left but memories and mounting debts, she pressed forward between the stalls of plenty that mocked her empty pockets and hollowed cheeks. Spring of 1872 had brought renewal to everyone but Katherine. The Wyoming territory brimmed with opportunity for those with strength to seize it, but she had spent the last of hers burying Thomas, who had left her with little more than his good name and a mountain of unpaid loans. The smell of fresh bread from Miller's bakery stall made her dizzy with want, the world tilting dangerously as she reached out to steady herself against a wooden post. Just a little farther, she whispered to herself, determined to maintain dignity despite the hunger gnawing at her insides like a ravenous wolf. Katherine had come to sell her wedding ring, the last valuable thing she possessed, hoping it would buy enough supplies to last until she figured out what came next. The voices around her began to blur, the colorful market swirling into a kaleidoscope of indistinct shapes. She felt her knees buckle, heard gasps from nearby shoppers, and then darkness. "Madam, Madam, can you hear me?" The voice came from somewhere above, deep and concerned. Katherine felt strong arms beneath her, cradling her body against something solid and warm. She forced her eyes open to find herself looking up at a stranger's face, weather-beaten, kind-eyed, framed by dark hair that curled slightly beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. "There you are," he said, relief evident in his expression. "Thought we'd lost you for a moment." Katherine tried to speak, but embarrassment and weakness stole her words. She attempted to stand, to free herself from this man's grasp, but he held firm. "Easy now," he said, shifting her weight in his arms as he rose to his full height, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. "I've got you. Please," she finally managed, mortification burning through her despite her weakness. "Put me down. I'm quite all right. Begging your pardon, madam, but you're about as all right as a 3-legged horse in a steeplechase." His eyes, clear blue like summer skies, studied her face with concern rather than judgment. "When's the last time you had a proper meal?" The directness of his question startled a truthful answer from her. "Yesterday morning, just a crust of bread." Something shifted in his expression, determination replacing concern. He adjusted his hold on her, and as several onlookers gathered to gawk, he announced with quiet conviction, "I'll carry you always, if that's what it takes. But for now, let's get some food in you." "I don't need charity," Katherine protested weakly, though her body betrayed her with its trembling. "It ain't charity to help a neighbor," he countered. "I'm Adam Xavier, by the way, own the XXX ranch outside of town." "Katherine Turner," she replied, feeling strangely safe despite the impropriety of their situation. "Mrs. Katherine Turner. Well, Mrs. Turner, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He began walking, still carrying her, through the parting crowd. "The cafe's just down the street. Think you can manage some soup and biscuits?" The mention of food made Katherine's stomach clench painfully. "I haven't any money to pay for—" "Didn't ask if you had money," Adam interrupted gently. "Asked if you could manage the food." Something about his straightforward kindness broke through the walls of the pride she'd constructed. Katherine nodded, fighting back tears. "Yes. Thank you, Mr. Xavier." "Adam," he corrected, carrying her past the curious stares of townsfolk. "Just Adam." Inside Molly's cafe, Adam carefully set Katherine down at a corner table, away from prying eyes. The warmth of the establishment enveloped her, along with the mouth-watering aroma of home cooking. Though her pride still stung, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach overrode all other concerns. "Molly," Adam called to the plump, gray-haired woman behind the counter. "Got a lady here in need of your finest chicken soup and whatever else you've got fresh today." Molly's shrewd eyes took in Katherine's situation instantly. Without comment on her obvious distress, she nodded. "Coming right up. Coffee too, with plenty of cream and sugar." As they waited, Adam removed his hat and set it on the empty chair beside him, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Katherine studied him properly for the first time, mid-30s perhaps, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble, and shoulders broadened by years of ranch work. His clothes were practical, but well kept, a sign of prosperity without ostentation. "I appreciate your kindness, but I don't make a habit of accepting help from strangers," Katherine said, attempting to recover some dignity. Adam's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Wasn't planning on staying strangers, Mrs. Turner. Besides, any decent person would have done the same." "Katherine," she found herself saying. "If I'm to call you Adam, then please, it's Katherine." Molly arrived with a steaming cup of coffee, placing it before Katherine with a motherly pat on her shoulder. "Drink up, dear. Food'll be ready in a minute." Katherine wrapped her trembling fingers around the warm cup, inhaling the rich aroma before taking a careful sip. The warmth and sweetness spread through her like a forgotten melody. "How long have you been in Willow Creek?" Adam asked, his tone conversational rather than probing. "Nearly 4 years." Katherine took another sip of coffee. "My husband and I came west from Boston after we married. He passed 3 months ago. Influenza." Adam's expression sobered. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The words felt hollow, as they always did. What good were condolences against the bitter reality of widowhood? "No family to return to back east?" Katherine shook her head. "My parents died when I was young. I was raised by an aunt who made it clear I shouldn't return if the West didn't suit me." Molly returned with a tray laden with food, a bowl of hearty chicken soup, fresh biscuits glistening with butter, slices of ham, and a small dish of preserved peaches. The sight and smell nearly overwhelmed Katherine. "Eat slowly now," Adam cautioned as Molly set the feast before her. "Your stomach won't be used to so much." Despite her desire to devour everything in sight, Katherine forced herself to take small, measured spoonfuls of the soup. Each taste seemed to restore a fragment of her strength, though she felt dangerously close to tears at this simple kindness. "I've been trying to find work," she said between careful bites. "But there's little available for a woman in my position. I was a teacher back in Boston, but the school here already has one." Adam watched her eat, his expression thoughtful. "What were you doing at the market today, if you don't mind my asking?" Katherine hesitated, then reached into her pocket and withdrew her gold wedding band. "I came to sell this. It's all I have left of value." Adam's gaze flickered to the ring, then back to her face. "And after that?" "I don't know," she admitted, the vulnerability of her situation washing over her anew. "The bank is foreclosing on our house at the end of the month." Silence fell between them as Katherine continued eating, savoring each bite despite the weight of her uncertain future. When she'd eaten about half of what was on her plate, she found she could take no more. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for both Adam and Molly, who was watching approvingly from behind the counter. "I can't remember when food tasted so good." Adam nodded, then leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "I've got a proposition for you, Katherine. My ranch is doing well better than most around here, but my house is in a sorry state. My sister kept things running proper until she married last year and moved to Denver. Since then, it's been just me and the hands, and none of us has much talent for anything beyond basic cooking and cleaning." Katherine stiffened. "Mr. Xavier, if you're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting a business arrangement," he interrupted firmly. "I need a housekeeper, someone to cook proper meals. Keep the place in order. The position comes with room and board, plus a fair wage. Better than fair, actually, considering how desperate I am for decent food." "Oh," Katherine felt a flush of embarrassment at having misunderstood. "There's a small cabin near the main house, used to be the foreman's place before I built him a new one. It's yours if you want it, complete privacy, but close enough that you wouldn't be isolated." The offer was tempting more than tempting, a solution to her immediate problems, handed to her just when she'd run out of options. Yet pride made her hesitate. "Why would you do this for someone you just met?" Adam's gaze was steady. "Because you need help, and I need help. Simple as that. I'm not offering charity, Katherine. I'm offering a job, one that would benefit us both." She studied him, searching for hidden motives, but found only straightforward sincerity in his clear blue eyes. "I'm not sure I have the strength for such work, at least not immediately." "We'd start slow," he assured her. "Give you time to regain your strength. And if it doesn't work out, I'll bring you back to town whenever you wish, no questions asked." Katherine looked down at her wedding ring, still clutched in her palm. She'd come to the market ready to part with her last connection to Thomas. Instead, she'd found an unexpected lifeline. "When would you want me to start?" Adam's smile transformed his face, softening the weathered lines. "How about tomorrow? I can come by in the wagon to fetch you and whatever belongings you want to bring." For the first time in months, Katherine felt something unfurl in her chest. Not happiness, not yet, but perhaps its distant cousin, hope. "Yes," she said, closing her fingers around her wedding ring and returning it to her pocket. "I accept your offer, Mr. Xavier." "Adam," he corrected again, his smile widening. "Welcome to the XXX, Katherine." True to his word, Adam arrived the next morning with his wagon, helping Katherine load the few possessions she wished to keep: some clothes, books, a small trunk of personal items, and the quilt her mother had made for her wedding. Her house, though soon to be lost to the bank, looked forlorn in the morning light, a physical reminder of dreams withered before they could fully bloom. "Is that everything?" Adam asked, securing the last box in the wagon. Katherine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Though the house held painful memories of Thomas's decline and death, it also contained the remnants of their brief happiness together. Leaving felt like abandoning him all over again. Adam seemed to sense her struggle. "We can come back for anything else before the bank takes possession," he said gently, offering his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. The journey to the XXX ranch took nearly 2 hours, giving Katherine time to observe both the landscape and her new employer. Adam handled the team of horses with practiced ease, his strong hands confident on the reins. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or tell her about neighboring ranches, his deep voice a pleasant counterpoint to the creak of wagon wheels and clop of hooves. "There it is," he said finally, gesturing ahead as they crested a rise. XXX Ranch. Katherine's breath caught at the view. A sprawling valley opened before them, bisected by a winding creek lined with cottonwoods. Cattle dotted the lush spring pastures, and in the distance, a cluster of buildings formed the heart of the ranch. The main house was larger than she'd expected, 2 stories of solid construction with a wide porch wrapping around the front. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Adam's expression warmed with pride. "My father started with nothing but 100 acres and a dozen head of cattle. By the time he passed, we had 2,000 acres. Now it's close to 5,000. "You've done well for yourself," Katherine observed. "Been fortunate," he corrected. "Good land, good water, good men working for me. Makes all the difference." As they approached the ranch compound, Katherine saw several outbuildings, a large barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and other structures whose purposes she couldn't immediately identify. To the east of the main house stood a smaller cabin, well built if somewhat neglected looking. "That'll be yours," Adam said, following her gaze to the cabin. "Needs some sprucing up, but it's sound. I had the boys air it out yesterday and bring in fresh bedding." 4 men emerged from the barn as the wagon rolled into the yard. Adam reined the horses to a stop before the main house and set the brake. "Boys, this here's Mrs. Katherine Turner," he called out. "She'll be taking over the housekeeping and cooking." The men approached, removing their hats respectfully. Adam introduced them one by one: Eduardo, the foreman, Patrick, who handled the horses, and brothers Samuel and Joseph, general ranch hands. All were polite, if somewhat awkward in the presence of a lady, but Katherine sensed no resentment at her arrival. "Mrs. Turner will need some time to settle in," Adam told them. "We'll continue with our usual arrangements for meals today." After the introductions, Adam showed Katherine to her cabin. The interior was simple, but adequate: a main room with a small stove, table and chairs, and a rocking chair near the single window. A bedroom just large enough for a bed and dresser, and a small pantry. Everything was clean, if dusty in the corners and bare of any feminine touches. "It's perfect," Katherine said, meaning it despite the cabin's plainness. After months of uncertainty, having a space of her own felt like an extravagant luxury. "The pump outside brings up good clean water," Adam explained. "Outhouse is around back. For bathing, there's a copper tub in the storage closet. I can have the boys bring hot water from the main house whenever you need it." Katherine nodded, already planning how she might make the space more homelike. "And my duties? When would you like me to begin?" "Tomorrow's soon enough," Adam said firmly. "Today, just rest and get settled. I'll have Eduardo bring your things from the wagon." "Thank you," Katherine said, emotion suddenly thick in her throat. for everything. Adam shifted, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what needs doing," he said gruffly. Then, with a nod, he left her to explore her new home. That first evening, Katherine dined with Adam in the main house, getting her first look at the kitchen she would soon command. It was well equipped, but showed clear signs of bachelor living utilitarian organization, minimal cookware, and a general lack of the smaller touches that made a kitchen efficient. Adam had made a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and cornbread, plain fare but filling. As they ate at the large kitchen table, he outlined her duties and expectations. "Breakfast for the hands is at sunrise," he explained. "Nothing fancy coffee, biscuits, eggs when we have them, fatback or bacon. Dinner, the midday meal, needs to be substantial. The men work hard and need the fuel. Supper can be leftovers or something simple." "And for you?" Katherine asked, taking mental notes. "I'm not particular," Adam said with a shrug. "Never developed expensive tastes, but I won't deny I've been dreaming about proper apple pie since my sister left." Katherine smiled at that. "I make a decent apple pie. My crust was always praised back in Boston." "Then you'll be worth your weight in gold," Adam said, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Beyond cooking, just general keeping of the house. Laundry for me, only the hands handle their own, or pay old Mrs. Perkins in town to do it. The men don't come in the main house except on special occasions or if I invite them. So you needn't worry about cleaning the bunkhouse." The arrangement seemed more than fair, especially considering the generous monthly wage Adam had offered enough that Katherine could save a little each month if she was careful. "Any questions?" Adam asked as they finished their meal. Katherine considered for a moment. "Just one. Is there a kitchen garden, or should I plan to purchase vegetables in town?" "There's a garden plot behind the house," Adam replied. "Been neglected this spring, but the soil's good if you've a mind to plant something. We make regular trips to town for supplies, too." "I'd like to try my hand at gardening," Katherine said. "I never had the opportunity in Boston, but I've always wanted to grow my own vegetables." Adam nodded approvingly. "Eduardo's wife might be willing to advise you. She keeps an impressive garden at their place near the east pasture." They settled into a comfortable silence as Katherine finished her meal. The events of the past 2 days still seemed surreal, from the depths of despair to this unexpected second chance, all because a stranger had lifted her when she fell. "I should return to my cabin," she said finally, rising to collect their plates. "Leave those," Adam insisted. "You're not on duty until tomorrow. Remember?" Katherine reluctantly set the dishes down. "Old habits. My aunt was very strict about clearing the table immediately after meals." "Your aunt sounds like a barrel of laughs," Adam remarked dryly. Despite herself, Katherine laughed. "She was formidable, but she took me in when no one else would, so I can't complain." Adam walked her to the door, lighting a lantern to guide her path to the cabin. "Sleep well, Katherine. Tomorrow starts your new life at the XXX." As she walked the short distance to her cabin, lantern swaying gently with each step, Katherine felt a curious lightness. The Wyoming night spread vast and star-speckled above her, the air crisp with the scent of sage and distant pine. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt the smallest flicker of possibility. The next weeks fell into a rhythm as Katherine established herself at the XXX. Each morning, she rose before dawn to stoke the cook stove in the main house and prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. The men were initially shy around her, but her cooking quickly won them over, especially her light, fluffy biscuits that Eduardo declared were better than my mama's, though I'd never tell her so. Adam typically ate breakfast after the hands had left for their day's work, joining Katherine in the kitchen as she cleaned up from the first meal and began preparations for dinner. These quiet morning conversations became a highlight of her day, a chance to learn more about the ranch operations and, gradually, about Adam himself. He'd been born on the ranch, the only son among 3 daughters, all now married and living elsewhere. His father had died 5 years earlier, his mother following just a year later, from heartbreak, Adam said simply. He'd never married, too focused on building the ranch to court properly, though Katherine suspected there was more to that story than he revealed. As her strength returned, bolstered by regular meals and purposeful work, Katherine expanded her duties. She planted the kitchen garden with seeds purchased in town: tomatoes, beans, carrots, radishes, and herbs that would supplement their meals through summer and fall. She gave the main house a thorough cleaning, discovering to her delight a piano in the rarely used formal parlor. "Do you play?" Adam asked, finding her running a dustcloth over the instrument one afternoon. "A little," Katherine admitted. "I taught music along with letters in Boston." "Would you play something?" The request was made almost shyly, revealing a glimpse of the boy beneath the confident rancher's exterior. Katherine sat on the bench, testing the keys. The piano was surprisingly well-tuned, despite apparent disuse. She began with a simple folk melody, her fingers remembering the patterns despite months without practice. When she finished, she looked up to find Adam watching her with an expression that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "My mother used to play in the evenings. I'd almost forgotten how nice it is to have music in the house." "I could play in the evenings if you'd like," Katherine offered impulsively. Adam smiled, the expression transforming his face. "I'd like that very much." And so another tradition was born. After supper, when the day's work was done, Katherine would play while Adam sat in an armchair nearby, sometimes reading, sometimes just listening with his eyes closed. Occasionally, he'd request a particular song or hymn, and on rare evenings, he would even sing along in a pleasant baritone that blended well with Katherine's softer soprano. These musical interludes shifted something in their relationship, creating a comfortable intimacy that wasn't quite friendship, but definitely more than employer and employee. Katherine found herself watching Adam when he wasn't looking, admiring the strength in his hands, the way sunlight brought out auburn highlights in his dark hair, the rare full smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. Such thoughts invariably brought guilt in their wake. Thomas had been dead barely 4 months. What kind of widow developed feelings for another man so quickly? Each night, Katherine would remove her wedding ring, still worn during the day, out of respect, and place it on the small table beside her bed, a reminder of vows spoken and a life now gone. Yet, as spring melted into early summer, Katherine found it increasingly difficult to maintain emotional distance from Adam Xavier. He was unfailingly kind, respectful of her boundaries, and possessed a dry wit that often surprised laughter from her when she least expected it. More than once, she caught him watching her with an expression that suggested she wasn't alone in feeling the subtle current between them. 6 weeks after her arrival at the XXX, Katherine was preparing Sunday dinner, a special meal for which the hands were invited into the main house when Adam entered the kitchen, hat in hand and an uncertain expression on his face. "Something smells amazing," he said, nodding toward the oven where a roast was cooking. "Thank you." Katherine wiped her hands on her apron, noticing his unusually formal appearance. He wore his good shirt and had trimmed his beard. "Are you going somewhere?" "Church in town," he replied. "I try to make it at least twice a month." He hesitated, then added, "I wondered if you might like to come along." The invitation surprised her. Though she'd been to town twice for supplies, she hadn't yet attended the small church, finding excuses to stay behind despite her upbringing's emphasis on Sunday worship. "I haven't anything suitable to wear," she demurred, gesturing at her work dress. "You look fine," Adam insisted, then cleared his throat. "But that's not the only reason I asked. Reverend Phillips mentioned they're still searching for someone to play the organ for services. Their regular organist moved to Cheyenne last month." "Oh." Katherine felt a tingle of interest at the prospect. "I've played organ before, though it's been some time." "Just thought you might enjoy the opportunity," Adam said, careful to keep his tone casual. "And the position pays a small stipend that could supplement your earnings here." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion touched her deeply. Adam had recognized not just her financial needs, but her love of music, offering a way to nurture both. "I'd like that very much," she said finally. "Let me just check on the roast and leave instructions for Eduardo's wife, who's coming to watch over dinner." Adam's pleased expression warmed her, more than seemed reasonable, as she hurried to make arrangements for her absence. The church in Willow Creek was a simple white clapboard building with a modest steeple, but the congregation was larger than Katherine had expected. As she entered at Adam's side, curious glances and whispers followed them down the aisle. Adam acknowledged various townspeople with nods, but kept moving until they reached a pew about halfway to the front. "Don't mind the staring," he murmured as they settled onto the hard wooden bench. New faces are always of interest, especially female ones. Katherine felt her cheeks warm, but maintained her composure, focusing on the worn hymnal in her hands rather than the speculative looks directed their way. When Reverend Phillips entered, Adam leaned closer. "I'll introduce you after the service," he promised. The service was simple but heartfelt. The Reverend's sermon on compassion and community, touching something in Katherine that had lain dormant since Thomas's illness. When the time came for hymns, the absence of accompaniment was noticeable, the congregation singing hesitant without instrumental guidance. Afterward, Adam steered Katherine toward the Reverend, a kindly man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. "Reverend Phillips, this is Mrs. Katherine Turner, my housekeeper," Adam said. "She's an accomplished pianist and has experience with church organs." The Reverend's face lit up. "Is that so? Mrs. Turner, you would be a godsend if you were willing to play for our services. Our congregation has many fine qualities, but musical talent is somewhat lacking, as you may have noticed today." "I would be happy to help," Katherine replied, warming to the man's genuine enthusiasm. "Though I might need time to practice before next Sunday." Of course," the Reverend agreed readily. "You're welcome any day this week. Mrs. Phillips has the key if I'm not available." As they discussed details, Katherine became aware of a small group of women hovering nearby, clearly waiting for an introduction. The Reverend noticed them too and waved them forward. "Ladies, come meet Mrs. Turner. She's going to solve our musical predicament." The women descended upon Katherine with enthusiastic greetings and questions. Adam stepped back, allowing her the spotlight. Though she noticed he remained close enough to intervene if needed. The women, Mrs. Phillips, Mrs. Garrett, the mayor's wife, Miss Whitfield, the town school teacher, and Mrs. Miller, the baker's wife, were friendly if obviously curious about her connection to Adam. "We're so pleased you've come to Willow Creek," Mrs. Phillips said warmly. "We desperately need more ladies of refinement and education." "How are you finding ranch life?" Miss Whitfield asked. "It must be quite a change from city living." "I've adapted more easily than I expected," Katherine replied honestly. "The work is satisfying, and Mr. Xavier has been most accommodating." Mrs. Garrett's eyebrows rose slightly at this, and she exchanged a glance with Mrs. Miller that Katherine couldn't quite interpret. "Adam Xavier is one of our most eligible bachelors," Mrs. Miller said, with barely concealed interest. "His ranch is the most prosperous in the county." Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I wouldn't know about that. I'm simply grateful for the employment." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Phillips interjected kindly. "And we're all so sorry about your loss. Adam mentioned your recent widowhood." Surprise flickered through Katherine at the realization that Adam had discussed her with others. What else had he shared? "Thank you," she said, falling back on the polite response that had become almost automatic. "It's been difficult, but I'm finding my way forward." The conversation shifted to church matters and Katherine's musical background, but she remained aware of the women's subtle scrutiny. When Adam finally returned to her side, suggesting they should start back to the ranch, she felt oddly relieved. The ride home was quiet initially, both lost in their own thoughts as the wagon rocked along the rutted road. Finally, Adam broke the silence. "I hope you weren't overwhelmed by all the attention." Katherine smoothed her skirts, considering her response. "It was fine. Everyone was very welcoming." "But," Adam prompted, hearing the reservation in her tone, "they seemed very interested in my connection to you," she admitted. "Mrs. Miller made a point of mentioning your status as an eligible bachelor." Adam's laugh held more resignation than humor. "I imagine she did. She's been trying to match me with every unmarried woman between 16 and 60 for years now." "I see." Katherine kept her tone neutral, despite the unexpected twinge of jealousy the comment provoked. "Well, I made it clear I'm simply your housekeeper." Adam glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Is that all you are, Katherine?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. What else would I be?" He returned his attention to the road, hands steady on the reins. "I consider you a friend at the very least. I've shared more conversations with you these past weeks than I have with anyone in years." "Oh." The simple admission warmed her unexpectedly. "I consider you a friend as well." They lapsed into silence again, but it felt different now, charged with unspoken possibilities. Katherine stared at the landscape passing by, her thoughts in turmoil. She still wore Thomas's ring, still considered herself bound by the vows they had exchanged. Yet increasingly her thoughts turned not to memories of her husband, but to the man beside her, his kindness, his quiet strength, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. "I've been thinking," Adam said as they approached the ranch. "The 4th of July celebration is coming up in town. There'll be a picnic, games, dancing in the evening. Would you like to attend? The whole ranch will be going." The invitation held no special significance. Everyone from the area would be there. Yet Katherine's heart quickened at the prospect. "I'd like that very much." Adam's smile, quick and pleased, stayed with her long after they had returned to the ranch. The following Sunday, Katherine played the organ for church services, her fingers finding the familiar patterns despite years away from the instrument. The congregation's singing improved markedly with proper accompaniment. And after the service, many people approached to thank her. The small stipend the church offered was welcome, but more valuable was the connection to the wider community and the sense of purpose beyond her duties at the ranch. Adam began making a point of attending church every Sunday, driving Katherine to town in the wagon and waiting patiently while she practiced before services. These Sunday excursions gradually expanded to include lunch at the hotel dining room or at Molly's Cafe, where Katherine had collapsed that fateful day. Sometimes they would walk along the main street afterward, Adam pointing out changes in the growing town or introducing Katherine to residents she hadn't yet met. To Katherine's surprise, she found herself looking forward to these outings with almost girlish anticipation. She took special care with her appearance on Sundays, wearing her best dress remodeled from one of her Boston gowns and arranging her hair more carefully than usual. If Adam noticed these efforts, he gave no sign beyond a general, appreciative glance when she joined him for the journey to town. As June ripened toward July, Katherine's garden began producing its first vegetables: tender lettuce, radishes, and early peas that she proudly incorporated into the ranch meals. The kitchen had become truly hers now, organized to her preferences and stocked with ingredients that allowed her to prepare more varied and sophisticated dishes than the ranch had seen in years. "If you keep feeding us like this," Patrick declared one evening after a dinner featuring roast chicken with herbs from the garden, "none of us will ever leave the XXX." "That's the plan," Adam replied with a wink toward Katherine. "Keep you all too well fed to consider working elsewhere." The easy camaraderie among the ranch household had become one of Katherine's greatest pleasures. The hands treated her with respect, tinged with affection, often bringing her small gifts: wildflowers from the range, a particularly fine trout from the creek, a carved wooden spoon that Samuel had crafted during evening hours. In return, she made sure their favorites appeared regularly on the table and mended their clothes without comment when they appeared mysteriously in her work basket. As the 4th of July approached, an unexpected letter arrived for Katherine, her first mail since coming to the XXX. Adam brought it when he returned from town, handing it to her with a curious expression. "Boston postmark," he noted. "Family news?" Katherine stared at the envelope, recognizing her aunt's precise handwriting. "From my aunt. I wrote to her shortly after arriving here, letting her know my circumstances had improved." She opened the letter later that evening in the privacy of her cabin, reading by lamplight. Her aunt's message was brief and characteristically direct. "Katherine, your letter was a relief after months of silence. I had feared the worst when my previous correspondence to your Wyoming address was returned. While I cannot approve of your current position, housekeeping is hardly suitable for a woman of your education. I am pleased you are no longer in financial distress. Your cousin Eleanor has welcomed her second child, a daughter named Margaret. Her husband's law practice continues to thrive. If your situation becomes untenable, remember that Boston, while perhaps not welcoming with open arms, would not see you destitute. Your education could secure you a position in a respectable school. Regards, Agatha Pembroke." Katherine folded the letter with a mixture of emotions. Her aunt's offer, conditional and grudging as it was, represented security of a sort, a return to the world she'd known before Thomas, before Wyoming, before Adam. Yet the thought of leaving the XXX, of returning to Boston's constraints and her aunt's critical eye, filled her with unexpected dread. When had this place, these people, become home? The question lingered as preparations for the 4th of July celebration consumed the ranch. Everyone would attend, even Eduardo's family joining them for the day in town. Katherine baked pies and cakes for the community picnic, while the men prepared to participate in various contests, shooting, horseshoes, even a horse race in which Patrick was determined to show off his prize stallion. The morning of the 4th dawned clear and promising, with just enough breeze to temper the summer heat. Katherine wore her best-dressed blue cotton with white trim that she'd recently altered to follow the current fashion as best she could, determined from magazine illustrations. She'd arranged her hair more elaborately than usual, securing it with her mother's silver combs, saved even through the worst of her financial troubles. When she emerged from her cabin, basket of baked goods in hand, Adam was waiting to help her into the wagon. He stopped mid-motion when he saw her, his expression shifting to something that made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Katherine felt a blush rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. It's nothing special, just—" "It's special," Adam interrupted gently. He himself had dressed with care in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and his least worn denims. His hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed close. Something had changed between them, Katherine realized as he helped her onto the wagon seat, his hands lingering slightly at her waist. The cautious friendship of recent months had deepened, evolving into something neither had yet named, but both increasingly acknowledged through glances, small touches, and conversations that stretched into the evening hours. The town was transformed for the celebration. With bunting and flags decorating the main street and a festive atmosphere prevailing despite the frontier setting. Tables had been arranged in the town square for the community picnic, while various competitions were scheduled throughout the day. The hands immediately scattered to their preferred activities, leaving Katherine and Adam to find a place for her contributions at the dessert table. "Mrs. Turner, Mr. Xavier!" Mrs. Phillips hurried toward them, her round face flushed with excitement. "Katherine, dear, I'm so glad you brought your famous apple pie. Everyone's been talking about it since the church social last week." Katherine laughed, pleased by the enthusiasm. "I brought 2, plus a chocolate cake." "Bless you," Mrs. Phillips said fervently. "Now, Adam, the men are gathering for the shooting contest in 15 minutes. I know you won't want to miss that." Adam glanced at Katherine. "Only if Mrs. Turner doesn't mind being abandoned temporarily." "Don't be silly," Katherine assured him. "Go enjoy the competition. I'll be fine, helping with the picnic arrangements." As Adam strode off toward the shooting range set up at the edge of town, Mrs. Phillips linked her arm through Katherine's. "He's quite attentive to you," she observed with studied casualness. "Mr. Xavier is considerate of all his employees," Katherine replied diplomatically. Mrs. Phillips made a non-committal sound. "Perhaps, but he doesn't look at his ranch hands the way he looks at you." Before Katherine could formulate a response, they were joined by several other women, all eager to organize the picnic. The morning passed in a blur of activity as Katherine helped arrange the food, judged a children's recitation contest, and finally found time to watch some of the men's competitions. She arrived at the shooting range just in time to see Adam win the rifle contest, his final shot splitting the center of the target with precision that drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. His face, when he spotted her watching, lit with a smile that seemed meant for her alone. The community gathered for the picnic at midday, long tables groaning with food that showcased the best of frontier cooking. Katherine found herself seated between Adam and the mayor, engaged in conversation about the town's growth and prospects for the coming railroad spur that might reach them within the next few years. It would transform Willow Creek, Mayor Garrett enthused, bring new businesses, new settlers. Your cattle operation would benefit tremendously, Xavier, with direct shipping to eastern markets. Adam nodded thoughtfully. If the railroad comes, we'll adapt. But I've seen towns torn apart by too much change too quickly. There's something to be said for measured growth. Katherine found herself admiring his perspective, neither resistant to progress nor blindly enthusiastic about it. It reflected the balanced thoughtfulness she'd come to appreciate in him over the past months. As the afternoon progressed, Katherine participated in a ladies' quilting demonstration, showcasing the stitching techniques her mother had taught her. When she finished, she looked up to find Adam watching from the edge of the group, his expression warm with something that might have been pride. The day's festivities culminated with dancing on a wooden platform constructed in the town square. Lanterns were lit as dusk fell, creating a magical atmosphere as musicians assembled with fiddles, a guitar, and even an accordion. Katherine, who had played piano for several hours earlier, was now free to enjoy the celebration. "May I have this dance?" Adam appeared at her side as the musicians began a lively reel. Katherine hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I should warn you, it's been some time since I danced." "That makes two of us," Adam replied with a smile. "We'll remember together." And somehow, they did. After an initial awkwardness, they found their rhythm, moving together through the patterns of the dance with increasing confidence. Adam's hand at her waist was strong and steady, his steps sure despite his claimed rustiness. When the music shifted to a waltz, he drew her slightly closer, maintaining perfect propriety while creating a sense of intimacy that made Katherine's heart race. "I never thanked you properly," she said as they turned in time to the music. "For what?" "For that day in the market, for carrying me when I couldn't stand on my own." Adam's expression softened. "No, thanks needed. I meant what I said that day." "What was that?" Katherine asked, though she remembered his words as clearly as if they'd been spoken yesterday. His gaze held hers, unwavering. "That I'd carry you always, if that's what it takes." The simple reaffirmation of that promise made when they were strangers, renewed now as something much more, left Katherine speechless. They continued dancing in silence, the music weaving around them as the Wyoming night deepened to indigo, stars emerging like scattered diamonds above. Later, as they rode home in the wagon, the ranch hands following on horseback some distance behind, Katherine found herself studying Adam's profile in the moonlight. The day had shifted something fundamental between them, bringing into sharp relief feelings she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "I had a wonderful time today," she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. Adam glanced at her, his expression soft in the silvery light. "So did I." "It's been a long time since I enjoyed a celebration that much." "Because of the shooting contest you won?" she teased gently. "Because of the company I kept," he corrected, his voice low and serious. Katherine's breath caught at the simple declaration. "Adam!" He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I know it might be too soon. I know you're still wearing Thomas's ring, but I care for you, Katherine, more than I should as your employer, more than I've cared for anyone in a very long time." The confession, plainly spoken without flourish or manipulation, touched something deep within her. "I care for you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if I'm ready. If it's right to feel this way when Thomas has been gone less than 6 months." Adam squeezed her hand gently before releasing it to take up the reins again. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. Just wanted you to know where I stand. The rest is up to you, in your own time." His patience, his willingness to wait while she reconciled her past with her possible future, only deepened Katherine's growing feelings for him. They completed the journey in contemplative silence. Yet something had clarified between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities that hadn't existed when the day began. That night, Katherine removed her wedding ring as usual before bed. But instead of placing it on her bedside table, she opened the small jewelry box that had been her mother's. Carefully, she laid the ring inside and closed the lid. Not forgotten, not dismissed, but perhaps, at last, becoming part of her past rather than defining her present. The weeks following the 4th of July celebration brought subtle but significant changes to Katherine's relationship with Adam. Nothing improper occurred. He remained scrupulously respectful of both her position as his employee and her status as a relatively recent widow. Yet, there was a new openness between them, an acknowledged current of feeling that influenced their daily interactions. Their evening gatherings in the parlor extended longer, conversations ranging from books they'd both read to childhood memories to dreams for the future. Adam began finding reasons to join Katherine in the kitchen during her preparations, sometimes helping, sometimes just keeping her company while she worked. On Sundays, their trips to town increasingly included quiet moments alone, a walk along the creek that ran behind the church, a visit to the small town library, once even a picnic on a grassy knoll overlooking the valley. Katherine no longer wore Thomas's wedding ring, though she hadn't announced this change. Adam noticed she caught the moment his gaze fell to her bare left hand, as she passed him a cup of coffee one morning, but he made no comment, just met her eyes with a look of quiet understanding that warmed her from within. August arrived with blazing heat that withered anything not regularly watered. Katherine rose early each day to tend her garden before the sun grew too intense, often finding that Adam had already filled the water barrels for her, leaving them beside the garden gate without comment. These small considerations, a book of poetry left on her cabin doorstep, fresh wild flowers on the kitchen table, a chair moved to catch the evening breeze, spoke more eloquently than words of his growing feelings. "You look happy," Eduardo's wife, Maria, observed one afternoon, as she helped Katherine preserve tomatoes from the garden. "It's good to see the shadows leaving your eyes." Katherine paused in slicing tomatoes, surprised by the comment. "Do I seem different?" Maria smiled knowingly. "You hum while you work now, and you watch for the patron when he rides in from the range." Heat that had nothing to do with the steaming preserving pots rose in Katherine's cheeks. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to another woman," Maria assured her, stirring the bubbling tomato mixture. "The men notice nothing unless it involves cattle or horses." Katherine laughed, but the observation lingered. Did her feelings for Adam show so clearly? And if so, was that truly a bad thing? The guilt that had plagued her in earlier months had gradually receded, replaced by a growing certainty that Thomas would not have wanted her to live the rest of her life alone, denying herself happiness out of misplaced loyalty to his memory. One evening in mid-August, a sudden thunderstorm swept across the ranch, bringing welcome rain, but driving everyone indoors. Katherine had just finished clearing the supper dishes when Adam appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Care to watch the storm from the porch?" he asked. "It's quite a sight." She nodded, drying her hands on a towel before following him through the house to the front porch. The storm had transformed the world sheets of rain, silvered by frequent lightning, the distant mountains appearing and disappearing with each flash, the smell of wet earth rising as parched ground absorbed the downpour. They stood side by side at the porch railing, protected from the rain, but close enough to feel the occasional spray carried by the wind. Thunder rolled across the valley, a deep rumble that Katherine felt in her chest as much as heard. "I've always loved storms," Adam said, his voice pitched just loud enough to carry over the rain. "My father used to say they reminded us that, for all our fences and buildings, nature still holds the upper hand." "They frightened me as a child," Katherine admitted, "but now I find them exhilarating, all that power and energy released at once." A particularly bright lightning bolt forked across the sky, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that made Katherine start. Without thinking, she stepped closer to Adam, who instinctively put his arm around her shoulders. "That was close," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. Katherine knew she should step away, maintain the proper distance between them. Instead, she remained where she was, acutely aware of his solid presence beside her, the gentle weight of his arm across her shoulders, the clean scent of soap and leather that she'd come to associate with him. "Katherine," Adam said softly, turning slightly to face her without removing his arm, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She looked up at him, heart suddenly racing faster than it had at the thunder. "Yes? Your position here as housekeeper, it doesn't have to stay that way forever." His gaze was steady, earnest in the dim light. "I know it might still be too soon, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's a place for you here, not as my employee, but as my partner, my wife." Though not entirely unexpected given the direction of their relationship, the near proposal still took Katherine's breath away. "Adam, You don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know how I feel, what I hope for." Katherine studied his face, the strong features softened by vulnerability, eyes that watched her with equal measures of hope and apprehension. In that moment, she knew with sudden clarity what she wanted. "I don't need more time," she said softly. "These past months, you've shown me what kind of man you are through 1,000 small kindnesses. I care for you deeply, Adam, more than I thought possible after losing Thomas." Joy kindled in his expression. "Does that mean—" "It means," Katherine interrupted gently, "that I would be honored to become your wife. Not immediately, I'd like a proper courtship first, but yes, that's what I want too. Adam's smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle, questioning kiss that asked as much as it claimed. Katherine responded with a certainty that surprised even her hands coming up to rest against his chest, as the kiss deepened into something that promised a future neither had dared imagine 6 months earlier. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, the storm had begun to move away. Thunder now, a distant rumble beyond the hills. Adam kept one arm around Katherine's waist, unwilling to break contact completely. "A proper courtship," he repeated, his voice warm with amusement and tenderness. "I suppose that means I should speak to Reverend Phillips about publishing bans. And I should write to my aunt," Katherine added, though the thought of Agatha Pembroke's likely reaction to her remarriage barely dimmed her happiness. "But not tonight." "No," Adam agreed, drawing her closer as lightning flashed again in the distance. "Tonight is just for us." They remained on the porch until the storm passed completely, talking quietly about practical matters when they might marry, whether Katherine would move into the main house immediately or wait until after the wedding, how the ranch hands might react to the change in her status. Yet beneath these discussions ran a current of joy that made even the most mundane details seem touched with magic. When Katherine finally returned to her cabin, she felt as though she floated rather than walked across the yard. Inside, she lit the lamp and moved to the small mirror hanging on the wall, studying her reflection. The woman who gazed back at her seemed different, somehow. Eyes brighter, cheeks flushed with happiness, a new confidence in the set of her shoulders. "Thomas," she whispered to the empty room, "I think you would approve. I hope you would." No answer came. Of course, but Katherine felt a sense of peace settle over her permission, granted perhaps from whatever realm her first husband now inhabited. She would always honor his memory, always keep a place for him in her heart. But that heart had proven larger than she'd imagined, capable of embracing new love without diminishing what had come before. Adam and Katherine were married on a crisp October day, when the aspen trees had turned to gold and the first hint of winter sharpened the mountain air. The ceremony took place in the Willow Creek Church, filled to capacity with well-wishers from town and neighboring ranches. Katherine wore a dress of deep blue silk, ordered from Denver at Adam's insistence, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned her mother's wedding gown. Eduardo served as Adam's best man, while Mrs. Phillips stood up with Katherine in lieu of family. The ranch hands sat in a row, uncomfortably neat in their Sunday clothes, beaming with genuine pleasure at their patron's happiness. Even Katherine's aunt had sent a surprisingly gracious letter of congratulations, along with a silver tea service as a wedding gift. "I take you, Katherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Adam's voice rang clear and confident in the small church. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Katherine repeated her own vows, she felt the rightness of this new beginning, not a replacement for what she'd lost, but a different path forward, one she walked now, not alone, but hand in hand with a man whose strength and kindness had saved her in more ways than he would ever fully understand. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Phillips declared, his face wreathed in genuine pleasure. "Adam, you may kiss your bride." Adam's kiss was gentle but possessive, a public claim and a private promise wrapped into one tender moment. When they turned to face the congregation, as Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, the church erupted in applause and cheers, Eduardo's exuberant "Viva" rising above the general celebration. The wedding feast, held at the XXX Ranch, lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, lanterns hung from tree branches, and a space cleared for dancing. Adam had hired musicians from the larger town 30 miles away, providing music that ranged from traditional waltzes to lively frontier reels. As twilight deepened into night, Adam found Katherine standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching their guests with a contented smile. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace, "though it still feels strange to hear that name." "You'll get used to it," Adam promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. We have plenty of time. Katherine turned in his arms to face him fully. I never properly thanked you, you know. For what? For that day in the market, for seeing someone worth saving when I'd almost given up hope. Adam's expression softened with memory and present joy. I meant what I said that day, and I mean it even more now. His arms tightened around her. I'll carry you always, Katherine, through whatever life brings us. And I'll carry you, she replied softly, rising on tiptoe to kiss him as the music played on and stars appeared one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, witnesses to a promise that had begun with an act of simple kindness and blossomed into a love neither had expected but both now cherished above all else. In the years that followed, the XXX Ranch prospered under Adam and Katherine's joint stewardship. The promised railroad spur eventually reached Willow Creek, bringing growth to the town and expanding markets for the ranch's cattle. Katherine continued playing the church organ on Sundays, while also establishing a small school for the children of ranch employees and neighboring homesteads. Their first child, a daughter named Elizabeth after Adam's mother, arrived a year after their wedding, followed 2 years later by a son they called James. The cabin where Katherine had begun her life at the XXX was eventually expanded into a proper schoolhouse, while she took her rightful place in the main house as its mistress. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, Adam and Katherine often sat together on the porch where they had first acknowledged their feelings during that long-ago thunderstorm. Sometimes they would talk of the future plans for the ranch, dreams for their children. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, Katherine's head resting against Adam's shoulder as they watched the sun set behind the mountains. "Any regrets?" Adam asked on one such evening, the 10th anniversary of their wedding day. Katherine considered the question, thinking back to the desperate young widow who had fainted from hunger in the town market. "Not one," she said honestly. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me here, led me to you." Adam's arm tightened around her shoulders, his voice rough with emotion when he spoke. "I thank God every day for bringing you to me, Katherine, for the chance to carry you then, and for all the days since when you've carried me." As darkness settled over the land they both loved, Katherine Xavier knew the truth of happiness, hard-won, and cherished all the more for the journey that had preceded it. From despair to hope, from loneliness to love, the path had not been straight or easy, but it had brought her home. And in the end, that was all that mattered.